Welcome to episode 7 of The Year of Being 70, the podcast that I, Lucy Macara, and my almost twin, Lisette Schoutemaker, set up a few weeks ago when both of us had turned 70 to have a weekly conversation about what life is like for us at 70. So here we are on week 7, episode 7. So,
So seven, so
yes,
fast already.
so
Yes.
much we've talked about, so much more to talk about. So, Lisette, what was the highlight of your week since I've last seen you?
Well, I think the highlight of my week is not something outside of myself, but is something inside of myself.
That sounds
Because I
interesting.
feel, yeah, because I feel, how can I say, it's so quiet inside. Like I've come to this place of, being, being,
Yeah.
functioning, but not from the reactive or egoic place, but from a place of being and allowing to unfold and to evolve. And yeah, a few things I've done. I have, this annually I show up at School of Life, the School of Life, not the big one, not the Alain de Botton, but another one yeah, I'm done. I've done a healing course, not a course. I mean, I have a BSc in healing science that I obtained when I was in my late 40s. I
Really? I
graduated
never knew that. That's
50.
another.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I did that in the US. And one of my friends started, a similar school here in the Netherlands. And for the exams, they need an external person. And every year they engage me, which I find a great honor, a great
Wow,
honor.
that's amazing. So you are, how does that work? What do you actually do to be an
Yeah,
external
so
examiner in healing, particularly?
this school is basically the exam is in the exam, the candidates have to present a case client that they've worked with for 9 times, 9 sessions. And so they have to show, that they see the parallels between the process of the client and the process of themselves. They have to also see, what did I not dare, or what could I have done had I been more present, and what happens to me? And then we kind of go in a process of can they, for instance, one of the women, we said, your case, it was a little thin, and she didn't get defensive. She just stayed in her mature, curious self as a beginning therapist because they're still graduating. So you learn a lot and then you learn from experience. Um, and so we watch for, how do they conduct that process? And so it's an hour, and I come into their lives for this 1 hour, which is kind of, one of the ways that that whole training culminates. But it's a beautiful honor to do that work.
How wonderful. Sounds fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm kind of I wonder how you actually grade people on their ability to heal. I mean, obviously you take them through, you go through a process, you ask them
Yeah.
about their process. Do you actually, do you give them marks on their results?
No, not in this hour. I mean, throughout the whole training, multi-year training, they are, but also at the Barbara Brennan School, we did not get marks. We got, you should do some therapy on this, or
Right.
you should, practice your working with your pendulum a bit more often, or you've kind of missed the whole, uh, dimension of the core essence of the person. And so, but it's very much, I always felt I was going to the chimney sweep when I would go to travel to Florida where the school was located. It's like, the chimney sweep would come and all these bits and pieces, black bits and pieces would fall out from the chimney, like right behind you. And the whole idea was to become a more open channel. And then, of course, based on the psychology of Wilhelm Reich, that I then thought, why did I not learn this in high school? Why did I learn, the map of the outer world, but no map at all of the inner world? And I find his, I've called it the childhood conclusions. Very, very useful map to kind of navigate when we start feeling we're not enough and we're never enough and we'll never amount to anything. And, you know, there's patterns of our thinking that we can link back to early experiences, and because that's when we form, our brains, but our whole response to the world.
Yeah, well, how
Yeah.
fascinating. That's a
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful highlight.
What is your highlight, Lucy?
Well, a couple of highlights, I suppose. The first one is a lot less spiritual and more mundane than yours, but important nonetheless. I think I said last week that we were having for Book Magic AI, the book writing app, we were having a couple of Zoom calls for the next round, the second round of angel investors. So we did that on Wednesday. And we were looking to raise a certain sum of money to carry us through the next improvements and developments of the app, which are all quite exciting. And I typically, I felt that I would be a disappointment that, however much I, however much I enthused about the app and said how good, and how pleased I was with it and everything, that probably we would have to work harder and we would get a certain amount of investment, but not enough. As it turned out, by the end of the next day, Thursday, Friday, we had applications to invest twice as much money as we had wanted. So now we're kind of waiting to see which of those we can accept, because there are rules and regulations about who and how much we can accept in terms of investment, and then which ones actually decide they do want to go ahead with it. But then I still think we're going to be in a position where we have to decide whether, yes, it would be nice to take a little more to make sure that we're sort of safe over the next 9 months to a year. But, are we going to actually have to push back and say, no, sorry, we can't take some people's investment because it's more than we need, and we don't want to overfill overload the shares. So anyway, that was quite a highlight and a relief, and I mean, it made me think, wow, we must have been really convincing on that call. I mean, quite genuinely. I mean, we weren't. I mean, it's not like we were, sort of being convincing in a way because that we didn't believe in. I mean, we all totally believe in the app, but it was nice to feel that the people who had come to hear about the options for investing were convinced that, we were onto a good thing, and it was going to be it's going to be a business that is going to do well. So that was nice, and not particularly spiritual, but
Well, you were working with angels anyhow.
yes,
But
very true. Yes,
no,
absolutely.
but also I would, just whole thinking, oh, we're not enough and we won't get enough investment. And, that's kind of a contraction, right? And then there was this abundance coming to you.
Yes,
And it
yes.
all pans out in the end. Then there's this abundance. And just to sit for a moment in, whoa. And then you say, we must have given a really good presentation. I'm sure you eldest daughter, you gave a perfect, but it's also you are you've conceived of something and you're developing something that, is worthwhile, and it's enough.
Yes, yes, that's
Now
true.
that, and
Yeah.
just sit in that, whoa, that's the feedback from the universe, you know?
Yeah,
That's the
no,
feedback
that's
from
a
the universe.
nice way of seeing it.
Wow, thank you, Lucy. You really brought something of value to us. How wonderful. And not only to us as investors, but to the world, because that's where the value, of course, is created. People wanting,
Yeah.
have envisioned and are creating. It's a very creative and entrepreneurial thing you're doing.
Yes, and we did make the point that actually that what we're doing is offering something that writing a book changes your life, as you know you will have found several times,
Yeah.
and we're offering that the app offers that to people in a way that might not have been accessible to them without that support and without a
Yeah.
huge amount of sort of spending a huge amount of money. They can get the support and the guidance and the structure for planning and writing a book that will actually make a huge difference to them and in general to their business as well.
And to the ones who read their books. And you're so
Yes, yes.
with the times, with the AI thing. It's like, wow, you're 70, but you're so on it.
Well, I'm not the tech. I'm not I kind of
Oh.
work with the tech, our tech director, Jonathan, who's absolutely brilliant. But yes, no, it is nice to be able to kind of offer that to the widest range of people. And I really, really hope that that's what we're going to do, build it out so that we get far, far more people. And I just, again, want to say that the other point that we make is that this is one of the most ideal uses of AI because we're not saying the AI will write your book for you. Absolutely not. It is all about you, the author, writing your book. But the AI is so supportive and so smart and so helpful in terms of planning and structuring and coming up with ideas and all sorts of things and promoting the book afterwards. So it's yeah, it's I feel it is a good thing to be doing, as well as hopefully a good business to be running. So there was
And there
that.
was one highlight of your week.
Yes, that was one highlight of my week, and the other was completely at the other end of the scale. I went to Dorset for the weekend to look after my two youngest grandchildren for the weekend, which was totally, totally other, using completely different, probably skills and and abilities. And it's funny. I mean, you are completely sort of divorced from this kind of, well, I say divorced. I mean, this was not a path you went down, but for me now at 70, going and looking after small children. At one point, it was just it was natural. It was what you did the whole time. It wasn't, I mean, it's always demanding, but it's more demanding when you go in as as granny and kind of get into their world, and you realize again, you go back into the world where you are the servant. Basically, you are there to make their lives run smoothly, worthwhile and fun, and all
Mm,
those sorts of things. So
mm.
it was, yeah, no, it was lovely. It was lovely, and they were great. And it's they're now these two youngest grandchildren are now at the age, they're 4 and 7, where the youngest is at school, and I think that's the time when parents can sort of breathe a slight sigh of relief and think, okay, the worst is over, perhaps, or the hardest part of this journey of being parents is over.
Was it like that for you?
Yeah, yes, twice basically. Yes, because I mean we are at opposite ends of the scale, you and I. I mean you chose very sensibly in many ways, I think, not to have children. I not only did it once, but I at the age of 40, I one of my first marriage ended. I had two teenage boys, and I met someone else, got married again, thought we would have children, found I was having an early menopause, and adopted two girls from Russian care homes, children's homes. And so I was again, I sort of went into motherhood, parenthood at a much older age. So the first time started it, I was in my 20s. The second time I started it, I was in my 40s, and had two young children and went through it all again. And sometimes I ask myself whether I was completely mad. But when you have children, it's you can't ever say you regret it. I mean, that would be like regretting the the people your children, your actual children, I've met one man in my life who has actually said and used to say quite publicly that he wishes he hadn't had children. And he has several lovely, wonderful children, had a brilliant family life, but he still said, if I had had my choice, I would have just wanted to enjoy life with my wife and not have
Yeah.
children. And that is
And of course,
that's
he
quite a
had a
brave
choice.
thing to say, I think, because, he wasn't obviously regretting the existence of his children, but but he's the only person I've ever met who has been brave enough to say, I wish I hadn't done it.
I know a few more because maybe they confess that more easily to me. But also, when I was doing research for my book, Childless Living, a book came out in Israel by Orna Dornath, who has interviewed women who make a distinction um, between their children. They say, I love my children, but I am not a person really fit for motherhood. Motherhood is not really my path. And we've recently had a documentary here in the Netherlands too, with it's actually the women didn't want to be, recognizable in these
Yeah, I can understand that.
witch hunt. You hate your children, you're wrong. So the documentary was with puppets, and the first few minutes you're like, what? And then, there were different puppets for the different women, and you got to know them, and it was actually really well done. And I think, I start my book, Childless Living, with sitting across from a young woman. And this was really true. This happened. And feeling like, there is a life inside me that wants to be lived. So I don't feel I've made a choice as well, much more that I have been true to what is inside me. And I don't think motherhood was for me. And of course, there was missing of, I had to come to terms with that. It's not so clear cut. And for many, many who have no children, it's not clear cut. There's a few who are not interested, never have been, and don't do it. But many of us are kind of under, yeah.
So you might have had children then. You didn't. I'm really interested by the decision-making process, whether it was, like a clear cut, I suddenly know this, I've made this decision, or whether it was a sort of evolution of a decision, if you like, I mean, how long did it take you from when you first started thinking I might not have children to when you got to I'm definitely not going to have children? Or did it work like that at all?
Well, there's a few things I remember is I remember reading a D.H. Lawrence novel. I think it was a D.H. Lawrence novel, and then asking my mother, why does everybody want children of their own when there's so many children in this world who need love, and you have obviously, acted on that. Why does everybody? And my mother was like, oh, you'll understand. You'll meet Mr. Right, and then you'll understand. And then, of course, I broke my engagement when I was 25. And there was a very clear, signal, this is not your way to go. And in a way that but I had boyfriends after, but I made lots of decisions that never, I started my own company and I didn't start. At some point, I thought, this is the road I'm taking, and it feels good. But there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of antagonism. There was a lot of criticism. But also, what we had, I don't know if you remember, Lucy. I mean, we used to say in our student days, your first child, before age 30, you'd need to have had it before age 30.
Yeah,
Now, when
yeah.
I turned 30, it was like 32. And when I turned 32, it was like 35. And I was 35, it was like 40. And I've had two friends who had their first child after 40. So this kind of upping of the age, I lived with that. And at some point I thought, oh, can it just be 35? And then it's just,
You
but
really
also who
wanted there
knows?
to be a kind of cut-off time so you could say, right, I've done
Yeah.
it, I'm past it.
Yeah. And then,
I
of
don't
course,
have that choice
now young
anymore.
women, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
so you kind of wished for a cut-off point where you could say, I don't have that choice anymore. I've
yeah.
traveled
Yeah, I
beyond
thought
it.
that would be, that would kind of settle the conversation. But now, of course, young women can freeze their eggs, and there's a whole
Yeah,
other choice. And also, Lucy, I wonder, I have not always been as careful as you know, as one would think. And I've never been pregnant. I've never been pregnant. So I have no clue whether I'm fertile. I've never seen a gynecologist because I haven't had a reason to.
that's really
I
interesting
feel it is
too.
the life in me that I have honored, and that's what I'm really proud of.
Yeah. I wonder what would have happened, what you would have felt if you had got pregnant.
Yeah,
Have you ever thought about that?
not really.
And
No,
whether
not
you would
really. And
have.
I've never kind of wished for it. Never
No,
wished.
no, I'm not suggesting you wished for it, but if
No,
you
but
had
if it had
found
happened,
yourself in that position
yeah,
and you had to make a decision, I guess.
I don't know. And it also depends on the life phase. I might have,
Of course.
I was 30, I think I could do everything at the same time. And in a way, we could.
Yeah, yes. But I mean, when I got pregnant, when we decided to have a child, I was working
But
absolutely full
look,
time.
take me back there
Okay.
because you're interested in my decision process. I'm interested in your decision process.
Well, funnily enough, when Rob and I got together, our general attitude was we're not going to have children. We're going to be working people. I mean, at the sort of very early sort of time, I thought he was going to be a theatre director and I was going to be an actor. So, we would have a kind of artistic, fulfilling life of that kind, which didn't exactly turn. Well, it sort of did, but it didn't. We did other things as well. And as you know, as I said last week, we went to Australia. We started a magazine, and that was absolutely. I was also finishing my degree, and then I got other jobs and started working in television, and it was all, work was totally consuming. And I don't think we thought about having children at all. I mean, and this was very early on because, as you know, I got married when I was 20, went to Australia when I was 21, and came back on a sabbatical to London for 6 months when I think I must have been 25 or 26. So we'd had, 5 years of intensive work, really, I don't think genuinely thought about children. Although, interestingly, or perhaps not, my father used to write to me in Australia saying, I hope you're going to make me a grandfather soon, which was.
Oh, yeah.
He
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
he really, and that was sort of, and I was just sort of like, I'm not going to respond to this. I can't, so I'd probably said something gentle like it's too soon, we're not, or something. But actually, I was still thinking at that time, sorry, it's not going to happen. But then we came back to London, and Rob's sister and her husband, well, Rob's sister was pregnant. And it was sort of like that was a real shock because, we'd all been this family. Rob's family were sort of very good, our closest friends, really, his brother and his sister and their partners. And they were expecting a baby. And while we were there, they had their first baby. They had this little boy, and it was kind of, I think it really shocked us in a way that this had happened, and they were so changed by it, taken up. Their lives were completely focused on it, and I don't know whether whether we would not jealous, that's the wrong word, but sort of thinking, wow, this is amazing. And I and
Yeah, I would say, oh, wow, look at
you would
those
have gone,
two,
yeah, oh
two
no, I'm
grown-ups,
definitely not
completely
wanting.
focused on this one little thing.
Yeah.
Oh, but you were, yeah, that's
So we decided sort of more or less then and there that, we'd give it a go and try and get pregnant. And by the end of our stay in London, which was kind of actually just after we were there from something like July till the new year, the day before we went back to Australia, I did a pregnancy test and discovered I was pregnant. And it was a sort of, in some ways, I think, typically for me, kind of not really thought through, because we went back and, we went back to work and everything was as hectic and, running this magazine as ever. And I don't think that either of us had any real idea what having a baby would be like. what actually being parents would be like. I mean, Rob might disagree with this in retrospect, but I don't think I really did. I mean, in some ways, I don't think nobody ever knows what being a parent is going to be like. It is something that you can't describe, and is, it is a life-changing event, your first child. And I sort of think you believe that, babies sleep a lot, you can just get on with stuff, and that's what I thought. We had made no plans for child minding, no plans for working any less. So James used to come into the office with me, or I used to work at home with him. Eventually, we did realize that it was necessary to find some childcare, and that happened. But it was it was quite a shock to the system, I think. And I also think, and I kind of wasn't aware of this at the time, but people seem to be surprised that I was a good mother. And I wonder what they thought. I mean, they didn't say
Oh,
that. They didn't say, "Oh my goodness, you're quite a good mother," and I never thought you would be. But I kind of got that feeling that people were slightly relieved, I suppose. But if they'd actually thought back to how I looked after my guinea pigs when I was small, they would have known that I was an eldest daughter, and looking after looking after small things was what I do. So, but I wonder if I was a bit spoilt or princessy before that, and people thought, I don't know. I just got that feeling.
or maybe this is again the pattern. People don't think I'm good enough, or, maybe this is again the thing where you feel, yeah, so how can people be so? But maybe also because you were a highly professional woman and then also you were a good mother. There's not too many women I know who have been able to do both.
Well, gosh, have I been able to do both? Um, I don't know. I mean, I hope I have. It's really, it's hard to say. It's difficult to assess
Well,
yourself. I
let
mean,
me just say that I was at your 70th birthday party and I heard your sons speak to you, and not only heard their words, but I felt, their huge appreciation for you. So I feel, that all starts in childhood. It's not that you've been a good mother because you're now babysitting, the children. It all starts from childhood, and they, yeah, they told some lovely stories about it, and they really appreciate how you were as a mother. And then this week, you've asked for investment, you've been oversubscribed. So to me, there's the successful businesswoman. And of course, not everything has succeeded. And, we've had our ups and downs and some things, disappointments along the way. But there's a successful businesswoman who is also very much deeply appreciated mother.
well, that's very nice of you to say that.
Oh, it's so difficult to take a compliment,
It
isn't
is, it is. I'm so ungracious about compliments.
it?
I don't know how. I know I've always been given advice. Just say thank you and just say, yeah, but I always kind of mess it up, really.
In the transformation game that has changed my life, when you get appreciated, you say, "Thank you, I'm glad you noticed." So that became a bit of a running gag. But I think it's actually really important when somebody you trust, you do trust me, right? You trust me with
Yes,
lots of things.
absolutely. Yeah.
But when I give you a compliment, suddenly you don't trust me because you say like it's all over the top and she doesn't know and they're exaggerating. So trust me, Lucy.
Okay, I will do my best. Funnily enough, one of my other friends at my birthday party, after the speeches where people had said ridiculously nice things about me, she sat me
Wonderful
down
things.
at one
Oh,
of the
lovely. Yes.
she sat me down, Paula sat me down at one of the tables, and she said, "Now listen, did you hear that?" And because you need to take that in. And she really kind of, had no, she didn't have a go at me, but she was, she had a conversation with me where she said, if you do not listen to what's being said, you will not have enough. She didn't use this metaphor, but you will not have enough fuel to keep going on, is what I took from what she said. And
Thank you, Paula. Well done. Taking you apart. I always think sometimes it's like a ping pong game. I somebody puts a compliment over the net and the other one is kind of quick to return it, and then it's all, but it is actually so lovely when people reflect appreciation back to us, right?
It is. It is. It's very warming, and perhaps in a secret place where I'm not prepared to kind of admit it, I will kind of hug that compliment to me and think that's nice. That gives me a glow,
Yeah.
which is nice. Which
And
is
there's also like, I think in my upbringing, it's like, don't don't step outside of your shoes, or don't,
yeah.
we have these expressions,
But
and
we call it
maybe,
don't get too big for your boots.
don't be too big for your boots. Exactly. We say, "Chanit nastya," don't walk like next to your shoes. I don't know. It's the
Ah,
same kind of expression with the boots being, don't aggrandize yourself,
yeah.
which of
Yes,
course we
exactly.
don't want to. So then, because we're afraid of this, we kind of go there, make ourselves smaller. And it's so hard to be exactly, where we are and feel, wow, these people say this about me.
Yeah.
Can I take it in like air?
Do you think it's more of a woman thing? Do you think women find it more difficult to take compliments and believe in their own um, powers or
I think
successes?
I love the way you come up with these questions. And I think generalizing, you know, also seeing, for instance, investment proposals. Very often the men, they have this kind, the idea is this big, but they go and they're going to conquer the world, right? Where a woman has this very thought out, very detailed presentation and kind of tries to protect the investors from paying too much. So yeah, maybe we are. So there, maybe that's the way you can come to accept compliments, to say it's a feminist thing to stand in our power and to stand and to acknowledge with all the things we can't do, there are things we are and we can be and can do.
Yes, maybe. And
Make it a
by the way, the
feminist thing.
presentation that I gave was not just me. It was, my our chair, who is a man, and our tech director, who is a man, and our finance director, who is a man. So, among that among that
Yeah.
group of presenters, I was just the one woman, and perhaps they made up for my.
Well, I think that's also what women do, and which I love, is say, I've never done this alone. There's always been help everywhere. And whereas sometimes men can pretend, this was all my brilliant doing. I asked there were others too. Well, they were brilliant too. So, but yeah, not, yeah, generalizing. I think we could adopt some of, not that full behavior, but really adopt,
Yeah, yeah, sometimes.
appreciate it.
Or perhaps men could be more like us and be a little more sort of.
Wouldn't that be great? I'd like to
It
live to
wasn't all
see that
me.
day. Yes, and
Moved more towards.
There are, of course, some. Yeah, and I see that more and more.
No,
Yeah,
it's a gross generalization, of course,
it
but
is.
but
Yeah.
going back to the child thing, have you ever had a time where you regretted your decision?
No,
Where No, that's really interesting. That's really
no.
interesting.
I went to see my niece in London when she had her first baby, and Jos was a bit apprehensive.
Yours being
I
your partner.
noticed. My partner. And when I came back, I said, I have no grandmotherly feelings whatsoever. There was nothing like, oh, now, I've missed out on children. Now I miss out on grandchildren. And no, I know my sister, she drives to Amsterdam almost every week to go see the new baby, her first grandchild. And I must remind myself, oh, yeah, there's I could go and visit them.
Probably just
No,
as
I have
well that
not.
you didn't
Yeah, no, I have
down
not
that route.
regretted it. I have felt, I lead, or I follow my life more than lead it. I follow my life. And of course I see, yeah, at your birthday, the warmth and the wonderfulness of a family. And I see this with my sister, how, yeah. and with friends, how much to enjoy these little bodies. And I go like, yeah, but in 10 years' time, he's, in puberty, and you go like, oh my, what now? And because you said, pew, the difficult times are over when they go to school, but I would think there's
Oh no, there are more. There are, of course. It's it's there. There are other difficult times, but it's the sort of the physical kind of nature of
yeah,
parenting when they're
yeah,
small, and there's broken nights and
yeah,
the constant, sort of need to entertain them and do things with
yeah,
them and subsume your entire life into their needs is
yeah,
just by the time they get, it's not just school itself, although that's really important because at that point you stop hemorrhaging so much money as a family because either you're paying for childcare or one or both of you are working less and earning less because you spend
yeah.
time at home looking after them. And when they go to school, there is at least a sort of structured time where, I mean, some people might be paying for school, but the majority of people are
Yeah.
are not.
And
And
you have those few hours when somebody else is looking after them.
exactly. And you're sort of sharing the responsibility as well
Yeah.
with teachers as well for, what they need to be learning and developing and keeping an eye on things. So it is another step. But yeah, of course there are other times and well through the whole period. But my oldest son, my oldest grandchild is now 13. And my son is sort of starting to feel, gosh, it's nearly over.
Mm.
He's not dependent on me anymore. He goes out with his own friends, and in another 5 years, he will possibly be leaving home in the way or going to college or won't be the same anymore. And I remember when James, my eldest son, went to university, I think I literally, for about 3 weeks before he left, any time I was on my own, I just cried. I cried and cried and cried
Oh,
because he was never going to live at home in the same way
yeah.
anymore. And I'm terrible about transitions and changes. I always kind of anticipate them and think of them as kind of find them very difficult to deal with. And then, by the time he left, I then just had a couple of days, and then I was all right after that. But
Yeah, but it is a big change. And it is like they go from under your wings and into their own lives. And
yeah.
so I wondered when James, yeah, your child is 13 and there's some independence coming.
Yeah.
And so when James was about that age, you started a family again. So was that
Oh,
also
he was older than that. I mean, I didn't,
oh, he
he
was
had
older
gone to university by the time
already? Okay.
the girls sort of actually, it took ages to adopt. I mean,
Ah.
adopting from Russia, two extremely bureaucratic countries with requirements, of sort of different kinds of requirements. I mean, in the UK, we had to go through this whole social work process where a social worker would come and interview us. It felt like for weeks or months and write a report, and then it had to go to court, and then we were allowed to adopt. And in Russia, at the Russian end, we had people working, an agency working for us, and we had to provide loads of sort of documented papers, and that was much more about money. That was, can you afford to
Ah.
to bring up this child? And then we had to go to Russia. I went to Russia 6 times, I think, in total. We had to go initially to meet I mean, this was two separate occasions. They wouldn't allow us to adopt two children at the same time, which was, I think I was ridiculous because anyway, but they wouldn't. We had to do two sort of completely separate adoptions, and it took ages. And we had to go to Russia, go to court, put in an application to adopt, then come back. And then I think with Vika, we went twice. With Julia, we went 3 times before we actually brought them home. It was an extraordinarily, but fascinating, a kind of fascinating project, as well as very, kind of emotional and but administrative as well. It was a strange time,
Hmm.
really.
It's very strange. Anybody can be pregnant, but when you want to adopt, you have to go through this whole thing. But it also shows how determined the two of you were to do this.
Yes, and yes. Well, interestingly, I mean, Richard is also adopted, and my first feeling that we should have children was about kind of him being able to have some biological family because he doesn't know who they are, and
Wow.
and then that didn't happen. It went completely the other way. But I was, still on this track where I felt it was absolutely somehow essential that we do this. And yeah, interesting. But I mean, on the one hand, there's you who decided not to have children and have never regretted it, which is great. And me who was able to have two birth children and then adopted two children as well. But then, of course, there are the people who desperately want to have children and are not able to. And I've only had a kind of teeny look into that window because when Richard and I were first trying to have children, I thought it would happen. And I remember, and when it didn't, and I realized I was having an early menopause, that was very painful. But I had two children, I had two birth children, so I
Yeah.
wasn't in that position. But I do remember taking the dog for a walk and having realized that morning that I was not pregnant again. And somebody, a woman I didn't know at all well, walking her dog in the park, who said, "How are you?" And I just burst into tears
Yeah.
and said, "I'm not pregnant." and
Yeah.
and I mean, it's really painful, even
It is.
even for me at that stage. So both of
Yeah.
us are lucky in our own ways for having made our decisions and being able to fulfill them. But I have to say, adoption is wonderful, and I thoroughly recommend it for um, as yeah, a different way of making a family if you want one.
If you want one, yes.
But I
Like,
mean, it's interesting that I think, I mean, surveys seem to show that younger women today, almost half, maybe 40% of women between, I don't know, that in their 20s and mid 30s do not plan to have children, which is a huge change from when we were young, I think. I imagine you were quite unusual.
well, I thought having children, was inescapable, that it was just a fact of
Yeah,
life,
it was
that,
what you did.
your children would take your life away. And that was just, I tried to have as much life as I could before having children. And I hoped that I could have a bit of a life, once I had children. I said this once to a father, and he said, "But children are your life." And I said, "Yeah, but it has never really appealed to me like that." But
No,
yeah. Yeah.
no, I can
Well, it's a
understand.
good conversation to have, and I feel we will come back to it,
Yes,
because it is,
yes, it certainly does. It certainly does change you having children.
yeah.
I don't think I'd be who I am today if I hadn't, but then you wouldn't be who
I
you
don't
were
think I
today if
would
you
be who I
had.
am
So,
if I had. So, there's parts of me that have not come to life, and but that's good.
well, I don't think you can look at it like that because I could think equally there are parts of me in a work sense, in perhaps a kind of creative sense, that didn't have a chance to come to life, or perhaps not earlier anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but I think it is true. Maybe not all of us come to life, and that's why we come back to this earth,
yeah.
I
Oh,
think.
oh, right. Oh, gosh, that's a whole other conversation.
Yes. We'll
Well,
do that next time.
yes, okay. Well, that's a very interesting one.
Okay.
Okay. Well, goodness, we've covered a lot of ground here. And
Yes.
yes.
See you next
Great.
week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.